Do, 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 do. Instead of elevator music, we just have me mumbling and, well, I can't carry a tune worth a flip.
Well, as long as you don't start singing. But I got to tell you, earlier you had some tunes playing that I tell you I was digging. I mean, I don't
Well,
know. Would we get dinged for copyright with that?
well, unfortunately, maybe, even though that was a YouTube streaming channel, I've gotten into this deal where when I'm in my office, instead of sitting here in dead silence doing stuff at my keyboard, I play some background music and I just Google, YouTube music or whatever and pick a channel. I think that was some whiskey jazz is what the channel was called or something like that. Anyway, yeah, it was pretty good music.
Yeah, that
Uh,
is some pretty good tunes. You actually have a neighbor that kind of is a bluesy artist that, I actually had a fleeting thought about trying to get him to make us some music, for the
Boy,
show.
yeah, that would be interesting.
Need to follow up on that. But
Yeah, have us some
I,
original music.
well, I do see that we have started out with a bang on Facebook. We are live. There are people starting to trickle in, and thank
That's
you
good.
guys for coming. And hey, it's time to hit that share button and populate this on out here. What are we talking about tonight, Rex?
Well, we've got two guests. We've got Randy Russ, who is a PhD. He will be discussing election integrity and all things about that. And I think our actual first guest is going to be State Rep Danny McCormick. We've had him on the show several times. And he's going to be talking about the recent, let's just say, snafus, boondoggle. I think he termed it boondoggle in Baton Rouge. Anyway, about that and constitutional carry, which, in full disclosure, I'm pissed off about.
Well, I think we described it in the show promo as the Shark Tank or Shark Week or
Well,
something.
it just
Because
occurred to me that as the chaos ensued, apparently around this budget thing, I've only seen the news clips. I hadn't dug deep into it, but it was like a bunch of sharks attacking each other. When sharks get into a feeding frenzy, that seemed to be what the Republicans were doing. Oh, this Republican did vote for it. This Republican didn't, and this Republican's evil and the Antichrist. And even Moon Griffon. I watch the Moon Griffon show every once in a while. But if you caught the Moon Griffon show this morning, his opening monologue was, well, let's just say you need to go check it out.
Yeah, well, plenty of examples of bad government. We're going to cover some of that here in a little bit. Maybe Danny will be able to enlighten us on what really happened because today and yesterday, I mean, I even today I heard an announcement that somebody's going to be running in a state senate race. I mean, that all of a sudden that decision's been made as a result, I think, of what took place down there in Baton Rouge over
Hmm.
the past week or so.
Well,
But
that sounds interesting and intriguing at the same time.
yeah, so there's all these revelations and this blame game going on out there about it's this legislator's fault or that legislator's fault that Jimmy Davis is or isn't getting funded and what's up or down. I mean, from what took place, on the House floor, I got to tell you, I have an opinion, but I want to hear exactly what happened. And I think Danny's going to be able to explain to us how exactly things progressed and what's reality and what's not reality.
Uh,
Um,
I, I, from what I gather, he's going to have to explain something about monkeys and footballs, and I'll just leave it at that to try to keep us as a family-friendly sort of show.
Oh, Rex, Rex, Rex. But hey, I want to tell you, I want to tell you personally that I saw good government at work in Bossier. I seen
Wait,
it.
were we in the same town today?
We were
Oh,
at
now,
my office. Somebody had, okay. Now I'm going to tell you, it's a state highway,
hmm,
and we know how the state handles highways. I mean, we're promoting the guy that was in charge of the state highways to run for governor, right?
right.
But this highway, somebody, and they just happened to do it in front of my office. You've been to Colorado or, Wyoming or Nevada,
Hmm.
somewhere where they do these, they stack all the stones up. You may not have known this, but that's called cairns.
Oh,
C
no, I
A
did not.
I R N S. Yeah, cairns. And so anyway, but somebody did that in front of my office. So I don't have the cut numbered, but it's in the files. But if you
Mhm.
pull it up, we'll show everybody what we're talking about.
Well, all right, so let me click a couple of buttons here and let me do this and back over to here and give me just a second. And oh, I got myself way off here. Hold on just a second. Let's do that and that. Somehow I closed that one out, but that's okay. I'm going to keep mumbling for just a second. Okay, here we go. Is that
Now,
that's the first one.
yeah, somebody made a Karen's pile out of the concrete breaking up from the roadway right in front of my office.
Hmm. Let me show the reverse angle from across the street. Yeah. I thought maybe it was like a Bigfoot marker. You know, Bigfoot's supposed to clack rocks together, some stupid crap. I thought maybe Bigfoot had been to visit you or something.
Yeah, well, the amazing thing was I happened to be outside and I was taking a picture of it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
this it was I was thinking, well, maybe King David on the city council was trying to erect another monument, you know, for Bossier City in front of my office, but I don't know that that was the case. And it just so happens while I was out taking a picture, one of our councilmen, and this wasn't his district, happened to be driving by on Benton Road and he
Mm-hmm.
rolled his window down and he
Really?
hollered. He
Yeah.
said, "Hey, I'm going to get that taken care of." And he kept on
Hmm.
driving by. And when I tell you, it wasn't 30 minutes later, there was somebody there taking care of it.
Wow. City government at work, doing what they're
Now,
supposed to do, taking care of the roads and streets.
I'm going to tell you, Bubba Williams, hat tip to you, brother, because the man operating this crane was efficient. With one swoop, he dropped down there, grabbed all of this, got it cleaned up, and took care of it. And, you know, I mean, good job on addressing the issue. I mean, I know the mayor was busy playing golf, you know, down at his fundraiser and didn't have time to deal with this, but good job to Bubba Williams. It ain't even your district, and hat tip to you, brother.
Well, good job. And, you know, we were glad to have Bubba Don on last week for some commentary. Okay, with all that said, let's go ahead and do our countdown, go through a little intro. You know, it takes about 2.5, 3 minutes. Folks, you know the drill. Renee, if you're watching, since you did not bring the popcorn and drinks to the Cypress District meeting, then you need to grab popcorn and drinks right now and tag and share and text everybody. Let everybody know that we are online. We have a couple of great guests on and plenty of stuff to talk about. So, what do you say, Duke? We hit the countdown.
Let's do it to it.
They feel helpless, they don't feel heard, they have nowhere to turn.
In all honesty, you know, we try to lay low a little bit because of the fear that we would not be able to camp there.
And I titled it A Shot Across the Bow of the Good Old Boys.
Hello, everybody. I don't think I've ever done a video before on here, but yeah, I wanted to tell y'all what frustrates me a little bit about permits.
Cockroach of the week is, drumroll please, Allie Feaster Smith.
We can't be apathetic about what's going on in our state. We have to all pull up our bootstraps and get on top of this. So you're right. There's a problem out there. I mean, and man, you can see it everywhere.
Well, look, we have allowed government to become our wherewithal to everything.
Well, I've not heard my name in stable or Baton Rouge in stable in the same sentence in a long time.
You're about to be killed by a Zamboni, or you're gonna die in 5 minutes.
This Bossier Watch live broadcast is brought to you by David B. Womack for all your contracting and construction needs. The Outdoor News, fishing and outdoors for our area. Acadiana Mortgage, over 23 years in the mortgage business. Pelican Training and Consulting is an IWTP customized training provider with over 25 years of success to show for it. Call them for a free consultation today. Pelican Training and Consulting matches employers with 50-plus employees with training dollars. Smarter Geek, making technology easier. And the many supporters, donations, and folks sharing information and watching out for Bossier. Now, grab your popcorn and a drink. Here we go. You know, you say that and you talk about the viewer count, but I remember, and I think we talked about this last show too, so deja vu, but I remember when we were like happy to have a dozen people watching.
I'm happy for the folks that are here, but I got to tell you, I don't know. I don't think it's censorship. I don't know if it's that, but it just I'm wondering if people are getting burnt out on hearing about their politics.
It's summertime. People are on vacations. This is less on their list. Although I've had some people that have reached out that have been listening to the podcast, so this doesn't really include the podcast count, and it doesn't include the Twitter count. We have a few people, not too many yet, but a few people watching on Twitter. They don't have to log in, so. And, so it is what it is.
Well, anyway, I think we need to jump right straight on into it and bring our first guest in, State Representative Danny McCormick. And I want to hear how the cow ate the cabbage down there in the closing seconds of this legislative session, because I'm hearing he was sitting there trying to bite his tongue, but he just couldn't quite. It was either bite it off and swallow it or something like that. What's the real story, Danny?
Well, I was about ready to bite somebody else's ear off. Maybe that'd be.
That'd be
Oh, you
Mike
was going
Tyson all over.
You know, I like what Mike Tyson says when he said, everybody's got a plan until they get hit in the face, and that's kind of what happened to us down there in Baton Rouge. Kind of tell you the story. I was sitting there in my seat at 5:30. We were going to be done by 6 o'clock. The speaker had promised us we were going to have plenty of time to look through the bills. He was rushing it. He was just taking it down to the last minute. I was sitting there at 5:30. I said, I'm going to sit here in my chair. I'm going to vote no on all these instruments, and I'm just going to sit here and be quiet. And I'm going to let the, Raymond Cruz and some others that were there that had studied the budget and knew a lot about it. I was going to let them do the speaking. And then 15 minutes later, I was standing up in the middle of the aisle screaming at the speaker, "This is a travesty. It's an abomination to this republic. It is a shame what's going on." I was objecting and trying to make motions that he was completely ignoring everybody in the room. It was a travesty. It was what you would see in a banana republic. And the Speaker of the House, Clay Scheck-Snyder, which wants to be the next Secretary of State, wants to be your vote counter in this state, was the biggest bully and showed no respect for the people of Louisiana while he conducted that meeting. It was abomination. It really was.
So I've just seen it from, the news reports and the online stuff and all that. But is it true that y'all got the budget at the last minute? Like I heard something like within minutes of the end of the session or something like that. Is that factual?
That's factual. Within minutes, $53 billion spent, and we wouldn't even get time. This was the Nancy Pelosi. You're going to have to pass it to see what's in it, Bill. Yeah, I mean that literally. It was an abomination what was done there. We'd already had the vote to bust the spending cap earlier a few days earlier, and that's what we're being punished for. That's why the state reps in the area that all we wanted to know was where you're going to spend this $2.3 billion extra dollars. Just tell us where you're going to spend it at, and they wouldn't allow us to see that. Said you're going to have to vote for it before we're going to spend it. And that the people of this state and of this community ought to be just ashamed the way that was shoved down their throats. And I hear people in the area talking about y'all should have voted to bust the cap. We didn't know where we were going to spend the money. You know, this is what people of this state probably don't know. Last year, in one House district in South Louisiana, one House district got $200 million. One district out of 105. We hadn't got $200 million in Northwest Louisiana in the last 10 years, probably. You know, it's just abomination how we're treated, and it was
Well,
it
now,
was a
Danny,
sad story.
Now, Danny, I got to play devil's advocate here, because some people say, well, probably that representative that's in that district, he probably, worked with the governor to get things done. But, legislators like yourself, you're unwilling to work with the governor. So my question is for your district to have been able to get 200 million, what would have been the compromise you would have had to have made to do that?
I would have had to vote to spend $2.3 billion. I would just gave the governor and the Speaker of the House the ability to write a check for $2.3 billion, and I wouldn't know what they spent it on. Think about that. What if I said, "Hey, Duke, I want you to write me a check for $2.3 billion." You say, "Okay, what are you going to spend it on?" I'm not going to tell you, Duke, but you better write it. If you don't write it, I'm going to say really mean things about you in the press. That's what we were faced with.
All right, so let me play devil's advocate for a second, too. So, your main contention is that you simply didn't have enough time to read it and see what was in the budget and where money was being budgeted and for what. Hypothetically, if you had had sufficient time to read the budget, let's say it had been presented, I don't know, a day or two earlier, or whatever it takes to read those darn things, you might have been for it, but you just didn't know what was in it. Is that the basic gripe of all the people that voted no?
That is the basic gripe, but I would have not voted to bust the constitutional spending cap. That I wouldn't have voted for that, regardless of what they were going to spend it on. I mean, that was important to me. It takes a 2/3 vote for the House to break that spending cap, and I wasn't going to do it. We had plenty of money to do what we wanted to do. We wanted to put like a couple of things we wanted to do. This was our plan. We were going to pay off some of the teachers' retirement debt, which would have saved us $180 million a year. That would have been, $180 million we could put to other services. And then that also would free up money for the local school boards to give their teachers a raise. And that's what we want. We want the power and the money to stay locally. We're tired of sending our money to Baton Rouge, and then we have to elect a bunch of political prostitutes to go down there and sell their soul to get a few of those dollars back. How about we just stop sending them to Baton Rouge? Doesn't that seem like the logical thing we should do?
Well, you said the word logical.
Yeah, and common sense is not something that I think is used in Baton Rouge. But I want to go back to this vote. So you were a no vote, along with quite a few other legislators, and those legislators are, being criticized, I think you could say. But and some people are saying that they should have voted yes, and they should have voted yes because had they voted yes, Jimmy Davis Highway Bridge would have supposedly got its funding. Now, I think we all know that that's Jimmy Davis funding's there anyway. I mean, that's a red herring per se. But my question to you is if they would have voted yes, would they have known whether by voting yes, would they have known if the Jimmy Davis funding was in there or not?
I know the House members would. Now, the Senate may have had time to look at it, but the House members didn't. They didn't. Nobody knew what they were voting for. That's the bottom line.
That's my point. Anyone that makes an argument that you should have voted yes, and by not voting yes, you condemn Jimmy Davis Highway, that is an ignorant statement to make because there's no way you would have known or had the opportunity to know whether the funding was in there or not. The legislators that voted no conceivably were voting no because they didn't get the opportunity to make sure it was in there. Is that fair?
That's correct. It was the Nancy Pelosi, you got to pass it before you know what's in it bill, and that's what happened to the Jimmy Davis funding right there. How would you like to know you voted yes and they withdrew the funding? I voted no, so I voted not to defund the Jimmy Davis Bridge.
Yeah, wait a minute. So maybe I'm confused, or correct me if I'm wrong here. The Jimmy Davis funding was, or the 150 million or whatever the number is, it was pulled from the budget that y'all were given with minutes to spare. Is that correct?
I would say it was pulled from the budget way before minutes to
Okay.
spare, but we
Okay.
didn't know about it until the last few minutes. They pulled
So
it, no telling when they pulled the money. They just didn't show it to us until the last few minutes of the session.
okay, and you may not know this yet. Do you know if that was pulled in the Senate or the House version? Was it the House that pulled it? Do we know who pulled this yet?
It was when they were concurring, 3 members from the House and 3 minutes for 3 members from the Senate knew what was pulled out of that bill. And Clay
Okay.
Schexnayder, the Speaker of the House, was one of those 3, or
Okay,
6
and
total.
so the people that voted yes literally voted to defund part or half of the Jimmy Davis Bridge. Is that a fair statement?
Unknowingly, yes, they did. Unknowingly,
Well,
because they didn't know what was in it.
yeah, because they just voted yes without standing on principle and voting no and saying, sorry, we're going to have time to read this.
And let me tell you what happens if you vote no. If you vote no, time runs out. We go into a special session, and then we tell what we're voting on. I mean, it's really simple. It wasn't like they were going to come in and, with a guillotine and decapitate us if we all voted, if 36 of us voted no. I mean, it was pretty simple. I mean, it was just, all you had to do was vote no, and you went into a special session. No big deal.
Yeah, and now there is a cost to the special sessions. I don't know what those cost, but they cost extra taxpayer dollars. But I would argue that in the big scheme of the whole entire budget, that's a drop in the bucket to know what was in the budget and what was not in the budget.
Probably $1.5 million for a special session, and $53 billion is what we're spending. So we would have to spend another $1.5 million, which is basically in a $53 billion budget, is a rounding error. And that's how much we would have spent extra to know what we were voting on.
We got to go get a list of these yahoos that voted yes to this and just run down the list and see, especially our local ones, and we got to get them on the show to answer for this. See what their reasoning was. They just blindly voted for something. That's what I'm seeing.
Well, there's a lot of other speculation, rumor, and innuendo out there, and I'm going to be kind to Danny McCormick, and I'm not going to raise those issues right now. I mean, because he doesn't have anything to do with any of that. But I will tell you, I think we should take a peek over on the Senate side and some of the activities going over there, because I understand, that's where some activity has taken place. Well, I mean, look, they sent this turd over to the House with minutes to spare. And I remember Blake Miguez getting up asking a question. This may have been the day before, saying, look, historically, the Senate always does this to us. They always dump this on us at the last minute. Are we going to have time to review this? Clay Schexnayder said, yeah, you're going to have time. Well, you should have said, well, is it going to be more than 8 or 10 seconds, whatever it was, before they posted it on the Senate side?
That's exactly right. I mean, as I say, it only makes sense if you smoke crack. That's basically what it boils down to.
All right. Speaking of smoking crack, so I want to switch gears. So I got to give you credit for bringing up constitutional carry for the last, I don't know how many years.
4 years.
Okay. All right. So I give you credit for that. And every single year, this is like the Linus Peanuts football thing, right? Where he's going to kick the football and she yanks the football out from him every single time. Now, so I give you credit for bringing that up. But here's the problem that I see, because I had no faith that it was going to pass. Because it would have required a veto override of the governor, because the governor had already said he was going to veto it. And to be honest, I don't have any faith, and present company excluded, I don't have any faith in our legislators down in Baton Rouge to actually override the governor. Now, give us your take and summary on constitutional carry and where it sits and what happened.
Well, I've brought the constitutional carry bill for the last 4 years. And there's a reason for bringing it every 4 years. I'm going to put it in front of those legislators every time make them vote on it, make them, and so their constituents can hold them accountable. And you talking about making people mad. When you make people mad, make them vote. You know, you would be shocked that politicians get elected to vote and they get really mad when they have to vote, which is an odd thing to me. But this year we did get it out of the House at true constitutional carry without any poison amendments on it. So we are making progress. It went to Jude B. In Jude B, there was an amendment put on it which watered it down. And in that amendment, they actually made a couple of mistakes that kind of poisoned the bill. Then it went to Revenue and Fisc, and that's when they started slicing it up and making it to something that wasn't constitutional carry. I had an NRA person with me and an attorney for the Louisiana Shooters Association. They put another amendment on it in Revenue and Fisc, and they were headed with two more. They said, this is not constitutional carry anymore. I think you ought to pull this bill. And so that's what I did. And you think about it from the senator's point of view, what they did. They killed the bill with amendments, which meant they didn't have to vote against the bill. I mean, if it wasn't so diabolical what they do over there, it would be a genius. But they made me pull my own bill because they kept putting amendments on it that actually poisoned it, and dying by a poison pill amendment is what happened to constitutional carry this year. But I do want to say this: we got the gubernatorial race coming up. I wish y'all, whoever y'all have come on your show that wants to run for governor or anybody else, we need to ask them, do you support true constitutional carry? It's important that you say the word true. We need all these gubernatorial candidates on the on the record, saying how they'll support constitutional carry.
All right. So with that said, that's an interesting segue. Well, yeah, let me do this part first. So one of the issues when Robert Mills ran for senator from state district, District 36, I asked him a question because I was on the Republican PAC then about constitutional carry. And full disclosure, he didn't know what constitutional carry was. So that was an issue with me. That's a deal breaker. That's the litmus test with me, with everybody. And I didn't support him in that race. Now, since then, he's been on our show many times. He's answered plenty of questions, and I'll get him to answer that question. But did you have any support on the Senate side from our local delegation, and on the House side too, or what was the status of our local delegates on your constitutional carry bill?
On my constitutional carry bill, I know Raymond Cruz, Doty Horton, Alan Seball, Larry Bagley. I know all of those were co-authors on my constitutional carry bill, so I know I had support there. And Senator Mills, I was talking to him about carrying my constitutional carry bill on the Senate floor if it made it that far. So he knows what constitutional carry is now, and he was actually going to carry it on the Senate floor for me. We were working with his staff to make some of those poison pill amendments taking the bad out of them. So he was going to carry it for me on the Senate floor.
Oh, glad to hear that. So that'll be a little feather in his cap.
Danny, I saw a question come through, and it asked about whether or not, maybe you knew, maybe you don't know, was Greg Tarver one of the people, that were in the room regarding the cuts being made, or did you hear that, or on a committee, or do you know anything?
He knows what was on HB1. Now HB2, I don't think he wasn't in the room there. Most of my district fared pretty well. Some of them think they got cuts and they really didn't. But Oil City, which where I'm at, got cut over $200,000 from their water sector program, which is sad. Think about this. We got a $53 billion budget, and the Speaker of the House is so petty. On a vote that he won, he figures out where Oil City is and goes and cuts $200,000 out of it on a $53 billion budget. That shows you how petty they are. All they had to do, they won the vote. Why would they go cut these small towns out of their water sector money? Why would they do that when they, if they would have just not done anything, he'd be running for Secretary of State right now, instead of defending himself against the atrocities that he committed.
Has to
Now,
teach y'all a lesson.
yeah, well, teach a lesson. That's what I want to know, and that's my next question, Danny. Is it possible that this is a wag the dog moment, and maybe some of this shook out the way it is to enable criticism to be levied at people, and as well, maybe deals were made to, you know, steer a Speaker of the House in a good direction with support of a lot of legislators that maybe stood to gain of this for a shot at the Secretary of State's office? Is that possible? Because somebody said that to me.
Oh yes, that's very possible. You can imagine how corrupt Baton Rouge is and multiply it times 10. But I tell you what, they thought they were getting at me and others in the area by cutting our constituents. They've made heroes out of us. They've drawn their atrocities to everybody's attention in Louisiana. We had the Nancy Pelosi, you got to vote on it before you know what's in it budget. We stood up to it. We are heroes to our people for what we did. I mean, the few people in North Louisiana that voted no on SCR3, that was the instrument that busted the cap. Those of us that voted no on it, the 19 of us, we're famous all across the states. I've done half a dozen interviews since we got out last Thursday. I mean, it's just atrocity what they done. It's backfired on them. They thought they were going to come to town and say, hey, we try to bully your state reps and they wouldn't let us bully it, so we're going to take away your goodies. That just doesn't work with people in North Caddo Parish. We learned long time ago, giving you lunch money to the bully don't work out good in the long run. And we didn't take it, and we're swinging back.
Well, I'll say this. You continue to push the constitutional carry issue. You voted no to a budget that you didn't read because you didn't have time to read it. So if I could vote in your district, you'd have my vote.
Me as
Thank
well.
you. I appreciate that. You bet. I appreciate it. It's always an honor, and serving the people is an honor. And I have so much support in my district that and from my people is just amazing. And last thing they told me before I went down there was don't go down there and change. And I'm not. Like I tell everybody, I don't have any crawfish in me. I'm not backing up from this fight. I'm in it to the end, and my principles are going to be the guiding factor, not what the bully that Clay Scheck-Snyder threatens me with. That's no work for me.
All
Well,
right.
sounds good to me, brother, and keep up the good work. And we appreciate you dropping in and kind of enlightening us on what was real and what was not real.
I appreciate y'all guys. Y'all have a great night.
All right. You too, Danny. Thank you a lot.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Well, that gave us a summary version. He also, Danny sent out a newsletter I got by email earlier today. I'll probably try to share that out on Bossier Watch that kind of summarized a lot of what he talked about as well.
Well, here's the thing. We just had this, Shark Week episode at the state legislature where one Speaker of the House, aka Clay Scheck-Snyder, you know, uh, like not Danny didn't say, but suggested, made a mockery of our government. Can you only imagine what he would do if he were to be the Secretary of State and he cut enough deals with this budget deal to enable him to be the Secretary of State where he's going to control elections? Can you imagine what he would be able to do? Well, oh, wait a minute. I forgot you're on the fence on whether or not there's actually fraud in our elections or not. I forgot who I was talking to.
No, that is not quoting me correctly, and I have the audio and video archives to prove it. But I would definitely not even consider pulling the lever for Scheck-Snyder, if I can say his name right, just based on what happened in the budget situation with these shenanigans.
Yeah, he stood there at the lectern and directly responded to Blake Miguez and said, historically we are not given time. We want to know, are we going to be given time? And he stood there at the lectern and promised those legislators that they would have time to read it. And I'm sorry, And I'm going to give credit to Raymond Cruz. Raymond Cruz, I heard some of his words in the closing minute. He says, look, I'm a pretty fast reader. I can read so many lines a minute. There's this many in this. I can't read this in time. This is the amount of time I have. This is how much there is to read. He said, I can't do that. I can't do it. You said we were going to have time. So if the man's willing to get up there and I'm just going to say it, lie, what do you think he would do as the Secretary of State? Good grief. We would be electing Hillary Clinton to governor of Baton Rouge or governor of Louisiana.
Wait, you're saying a politician lied?
I know that is unheard of, but look.
And I got a good laugh out of our next guest, so let's go ahead and bring him in.
Let's bring him in.
All
All right, fellas, y'all are cracking me up.
How are you doing, Randy?
I'm good, Rex. Thank you for having me on. And I am in the Baton Rouge area, but don't hold it against me.
Not too much.
Well, Randy, I know that you find that hard to believe that politicians would be corrupt, or there's even, any reason whatsoever for the public to have any worry about elections. I mean, I don't know, but you came to the Republican Parish Executive Committee, meeting here recently, and you gave a presentation, and I asked you to come on the show to kind of go through that tonight. So,
right.
What are you going to tell us? I guess first tell our audience a little bit about who you are, and
Sure.
you're a little bit of a controversial figure too, right?
Yeah, I am. But, for most of my career, I worked 30 years. I'm from Baton Rouge, grew up in Venezuela. I'm an oil kid. My dad was in the oil industry. So we left Venezuela when I was 7 years old, and we moved to another third world country, South Louisiana, circa 1965. And what Danny was just sharing with us is the kind of stuff that goes on in Venezuela and other countries like that. I worked in industry for 30 years, left CEO and president position of a very prominent Louisiana company, privately held, to return to academia, where I spent the last 12 years as a professor of marketing. So my undergraduate degree is in industrial engineering and management. I was taught to run factories and processes. Elections are just another form of process. And my PhD is in marketing from LSU, so I'm overeducated, to be sure. I was politically uninvolved, like many citizens in Louisiana. I voted regularly, seriously, kept up with the main issues, but I assumed that everything was okay. And I was a registered independent all of my life until 2020, when I switched to Republican. I tended to vote Republican all the time anyway. And on November 3rd, as many people who are listening saw, the 5 swing states stopped counting simultaneously. I watched those returns till early in the morning. And when my dear wife woke up that morning, I started ranting about it. And after a week of that, she told me, you either need to shut up or do something. So I used my business research skills, my analytical skills, to begin to study what actually happened. And so over the last couple of years, I've spent several thousand hours doing research and speaking around the state on the issue of election integrity. Our team, Louisiana Citizens for Election Integrity, worked very closely with the Secretary of State, Kyle Ardoin, for almost 2 years before we learned that he was not being honest with us and would not fulfill the commitments that he made to us about things that we thought should be done. And so that's what brought me to Bossier recently, Duke, when you invited me. And thank you again for inviting me to come.
So I got a question, because you mentioned the 20, the thought crossed my mind. So let's back up to the 2016 election when Trump was elected, because I know my wife and I were watching, the election coverage, and, I don't know, around 9:30 or 10 o'clock, it looked like Hillary was going to win. And, we stayed up till, I don't know, it was 12:30, 1 o'clock, whatever it was, when the swing started happening. Did you notice any correlation between the time that they stopped, maybe these same states or other states stopped counting the ballots in 2016 versus the 2020 election? Was there a
I
correlation in the
did.
time?
I didn't notice a systematic pattern like we saw in 2020 and 2016. It appeared to me to be more random. I mean, what we look at in statistics is patterns.
Right.
And in 2016, I didn't see it. You know, what's coming out is that the FBI and the intelligence community has been involved in election interference going back to 2012 or even earlier. So we don't just talk about machines. You know, everybody wants to talk about China and machines and all of that. But election interference is a much broader context, a much broader issue. And I think when we look at the involvement of the FBI, the CIA, et cetera, they've been influencing elections in this country for quite some time. And we know that the CIA, the most recent famous example, is they ran a coup in Ukraine in 2014. We call those color revolutions. And they use propaganda and electronic voting machines to skew those results. And we'll talk about that in one of my slides, how they overturn or overthrow duly elected governments around the world.
Yeah, kind of interesting that you say that, because I would argue maybe some of these shenanigans have been going on for quite a while, and the one differentiating factor that we have is the internet, and
Mm-hmm.
also, of course, social media and various platforms, because we're able to get the word out now. Before, we relied
Right.
on the major network stations, TV stations, and we couldn't share information. So I would argue that maybe one of the reasons we're able to start looking at this and start realizing what's going on is because we're all able to share information almost
Sure.
instantly.
Yeah, and what Danny was relating about what happened in Baton Rouge at the legislature is a good example. Um, I say elections have consequences, and corrupt elections have catastrophic consequences. And what we saw in Baton Rouge last week was the uniparty, and very few people were willing to stand up, like Danny, Doty, and others, who to do the right thing, and that's the consequence of corrupt elections. So,
Well, let's jump into your slides and move a little bit forward.
sure.
And I saw it already, but it kind of it. That was the first time that I saw it. In fact, that meeting was the first time I'd met you, and I was really expecting more of a deep dive into machines and process of counting votes and all that kind of stuff. But really,
Mm,
your show here was more tying in the activities of the government in maybe and providing, I hate to say the evidence, but providing the well, it's the evidence that something is askew, and you're
sure.
basically explaining it, breaking it down for folks in layperson's terms.
Correct. So here's the basic premise, and what everybody can kind of hang their hat on. If the government is involved, if the government agencies who regulate and certify our voting machines are involved in setting up censorship enterprises that involve secretaries of state around the country, the National Association of Secretaries of State, who then can turn in their own citizens to be censored on social media, how in the world can we trust them with our election systems, specifically election machines? And that's what this presentation really starts off with: censorship, because our vote is the most important voice that we have as citizens of this country. And that's why the founders, and y'all were talking about this before the show started, that's why the founders made the First Amendment to our great Constitution about freedom of speech, because the British government and tyrannical governments around the world today, they focus on silencing people who they disagree with and who challenge the party line or the propaganda. And so freedom of speech is a core right that is directly linked to freedom of our vote. And so if speech is attacked by the government, our votes are not far behind.
Rex, I mean, just 2 hours before the start of this show, an example of the erosion, of our First Amendment rights, we saw it at a local level on a local
Yes.
small board. And I would contend that probably because of the actions of the federal government, I think it's emboldening even our local, governments to try to censor, the citizens even more so. Would you agree with that?
Well, I would
Yes,
agree.
I
Yeah.
mean we see it with school boards. They're labeling parents as domestic terrorists, and that's out of the Nazi and totalitarian playbook. You label your opponents, and then you marginalize them, you silence them, and ultimately you arrest them and put them away. That's where this leads.
So let me, and I'm just going off on a tangent here for just a second, and then we'll get into your presentation. So it just occurred to me that when we discover these voting irregularities, and I was just thinking about our Cypress District meeting, which we'll talk about more either Thursday night or next Tuesday night if we do a Thursday night show this week again. But are there any repercussions or what are the penalties if you get caught cheating? I mean, I may be jumping ahead in the presentation here a little bit, I don't know, but what do we citizens do if we catch them cheating? And what are the repercussions for that?
The deck is stacked against the citizens. We have filed freedom of information requests, and we've been stunted, in those. We tried to get cast vote records, which are electronic records from the voting machines themselves. And we were given a bill for over $300,000 to access those by the outside counsel of the Secretary of State. So at every turn, we've been blocked. And the question is why? If it is what they say it is, free, fair, and safe, and these voting systems are in fact secure, I'll give you another example. We privately and professionally in October of 2021 brought national experts privately to the Secretary of State and his technical team. And we said, we want to look at the Dominion software, which we pay for as citizens. We'll come to your office. We'll have our technical experts look over the shoulder of your people, and we want to go through the code. We want to look at the program. And they hemmed and hawed and gave excuses. The truth of the matter is the software that counts our votes is patented, proprietary, and owned by Dominion Voting Systems, global headquarters in Toronto, Canada, and you'll see this in the presentation. Nobody knows who owns them because they're owned by a hedge fund, and nobody knows where their funding comes from. So if it is what our election official says it is, and after all, guys, vote counting is 1 + 1 + 1. It's all addition, no division, no multiplication, no decimals. So why can't we look at the software as citizens who are paying for it? And anytime someone hides something and makes excuses about it, there's a reason.
Well, okay. Yeah, and again, you can stop me at any point if I'm jumping ahead, but I've long been an advocate, as a tech guy, long been an advocate for open source systems. Now, and I won't get too far into this, but you said something there where you wanted the Secretary of State to show you all the code. The Secretary, and I'm not defending Kyle's office, but the Secretary of State literally can't show you that code because it's compiled on the machines. You'd have to get Dominion to do that.
Well, that's what we said. We know that. We
Right.
said, let you and the vendor sit down. We won't touch any keys. And the national experts that we have access to have top secret clearances, government clearances. One of them worked for his entire career at Sandia National Laboratories, and his portfolio there was cybersecurity and electronic countermeasures for our nuclear arsenal and nuclear platforms. That's the level of people that we have access to that we were going to bring to the table, and we're still waiting. So that's the long answer to your question is there's no transparency in Louisiana election systems, in
Okay.
our view.
Well, let's slide along through this slide real quick because I know that there's
Sure.
going to be some. I already know I have some questions that I want to pose to get your response to as we go through this thing. So let's run through these real quick.
Sure. So election interference in Louisiana. I'm Randy Russ. John Scanlon's my colleague that we work closely together as co-founders of Citizens for Election Integrity. John was owner and CEO of the 15th largest telecommunication company in America, ETEL, based in Ascension Parish. So this is a tweet from Jeff Landry, based on the Jeff Landry Missouri, Louisiana versus Biden administration censorship enterprise lawsuit. Government censorship is bipartisan. If they don't like you, they will censor you. No one is safe when the First Amendment is violated. Those are not my words. Those are Jeff Landry's words. Next slide. So here's what we do at Louisiana Citizens, where we do open source intelligence analysis and research of elections since November 4th of 2020. We are a group of Louisiana-based and national analysts and investigators. We have a network of activists in all 50 states. We particularly focused on the Durham investigation, Missouri, Louisiana et al. Versus Biden, which is the censorship enterprise case. We thoroughly researched the Twitter files when they come out. We follow the House Oversight Committee and Judiciary Select Committee. And our areas of focus are voter registration, electronic voting systems, state-sponsored censorship, campaign finance, and paper-based voting systems. So those are the 5 areas we look at. Next slide.
Now, before you go to this one, Rex just made, to everybody watching, Rex just made a pretty important post. He said, if we go offline on Facebook, find us on YouTube or Twitter. And the reason being is, Randy, isn't there a track record talking about censorship when this information that you're putting out here, hasn't it historically been cut?
It's been cut by YouTube, and it's been cut by Facebook when we put it on another platform. So it's been censored twice, and it's also been censored by the Louisiana Federation of Republican Women in January, where they banned me from speaking at their meeting. So we've been censored by a local statewide Republican women's group, and
Now,
by Facebook and by YouTube.
now, I'm sorry, we're going to be off on a tangent, but I want to address that. I want to address the Republican women because I got to tell you that issue there kind of offends me because, and I don't know the why of that, but I would like to hear. I've heard plenty of, friends who are associated with the Republican women. I've heard them say they've heard, I hate to say rumor and innuendo of the why, but how did that situation with the Republican women get there? Why did they say? Because I've done this is the second time I've dealt with you. You're a smart guy. You've never been rude. You've been kind. I don't understand what they took offense to the information that you're putting out there. What went sideways
I
there?
think the nerve that we touched, as long as I was speaking about voter registration and machines, no one really bothered us. And I only go where I'm invited. We don't promote this. We don't really have a website. We're not on social media. We only go present in person to groups who invite us. And so we were being invited to go to various Republican women's groups, and things didn't start getting dicey until we identified that Kyle Ardoin, as the president of the National Association of Secretaries of State, is involved in the censorship enterprise, which has been uncovered by the Jeff Landry lawsuit. And so that I believe was the beginning. I began to talk about that in New Orleans in October of last year, when the discoveries started coming out in the Landry lawsuit. And that's where we identified that the National Association of Secretaries of State were a co-conspirator with the Department of Homeland Security, CISA, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, and the Election Assistance Commission, which I'm going to show you the evidence of that in this presentation, that the Secretaries of State participated in creating the censorship portal such that they can turn in their own citizens to be censored for misinformation about elections. And it was at that point that the LFRW sent a letter out broadly, and my name was the first name starting off the letter, saying this individual should not be allowed to speak at any of our meetings. And there was a threat in there that if they allowed me to speak, that the club would be sanctioned and possibly shut down. And so I'm a new Republican. I just joined the party, registered as a Republican in I think 2021. And so it's a heck of a deal when a new Republican who's simply trying to present facts is censored by my own party, or by I didn't really even know what Republican women's clubs were, because I've not been an active political person my whole life.
Right.
So it was very disappointing to me.
So, yeah, I mean, and I got to tell you, when I heard this story, and I had never spoke to you, and I didn't even know you, but I heard this story about that essentially the LFRW was censoring you from making this presentation, which is about censorship and our elections and election integrity. And in summation, you're saying it's basically because you were saying that Kyle Ardoin was a part of what we now know from a Jeff Landry lawsuit, and they want to silence you. And
And the U.S. Congress. So you're going to see a chart that was presented in Congress, in the Oversight Committee, that clearly shows that the National Association of Secretaries of State is part of the censorship enterprise, government state-sponsored censorship of citizens in Louisiana. And Duke, I asked in the RPEC meeting last week, you saw it. I asked for a show of hands, how many of y'all have been censored on social media? And about half the group raised their hands, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
so
Oh no. I would. You're being fair. It was more than half. I would argue that it was closer to 90% of the people in the room raising their hand.
Every group I speak to, and I've spoken to about 2,000 people personally in the last year and a half, every group that I asked that question of, half or more of the people have been censored. But what they don't know is the government, federal and state, and even local governments are behind that censorship.
Right. So that's where I want to interject for a second, because, I'm a capitalistic pig. I make no bones about it. And I believe that Facebook, Twitter, whether you want to consider them the town square or not, YouTube or whatever, have every right as a business to cut your broadcast if they don't like the content. Now, where I draw the line is,
and we agree on that.
Okay, great. So where I draw the line is when there's government involvement in that. And you said even at the local level. So I'm going to ask you, do you all have, and I hate to say y'all because it sounds like we're talking about a top secret organization, do y'all have proof of that, or where is the proof in the pudding?
You'll see that in a minute. There are 7 parish level election officials who applied for membership in the censorship portal run by the Center for Internet Security, which gives them the ability to turn in citizens, local citizens, for misinformation. And misinformation is a euphemism for we don't like what you're saying. It's
All
one of
right.
those clever Washington terms, which really means we want to shut you down.
Right, and to be clear, and I'm sure you probably will address this some more, but this Center for Information
Internet security.
Internet Security is a government-funded organization. Let me tell you where I'm headed with that.
Mm-hmm.
So to clarify, a lot of people think the Better Business Bureau is a government-run organization, and it's not.
Right.
You know, a lot of people think the Louisiana High School Athletic Association is a government-run deal. It's not. It's a private entity. Okay. But this other one is, correct me if I'm wrong, is a government-run organization. Is that correct?
The Center for Internet Security is a 501c3 headquartered in East Greenbush, New York. It is funded by the Department of Homeland Security, and it is not subject to public disclosure laws. And so one of the reasons why the government works through 501c3s is they can hide funding, they can hide personnel, they can hide nefarious activities because those entities are not subject to FOIAs, to public disclosure.
Basically, like, you know, we see in the movies all the time, a CIA or NSA front organization.
It's a cutout. It's called a cutout.
Okay. Okay.
Right.
Well, let's get back on track, Randy, on your slideshow, and let's get through there.
So one of the things that we've been called is election deniers, and people are, you know, calling us names, but they can't argue with our facts. So this is a poll. Rasmussen Reports does a tracking poll on election integrity. This is April 20th, 2023. Here's the question set. How likely is it that cheating affected the outcomes of some races in last year's midterm elections? That would be 2022. 60% said it's likely, 78% Republicans, 48%, almost a majority of Democrats, and 53% unaffiliated. So, gentlemen, I am not in the minority in what I'm talking about. Secondly, and this is important, how likely is it that state and federal officials are ignoring evidence of widespread election fraud? 62% said likely. That was 79% Republicans, 50% Democrats, and 57% unaffiliated. What our officials are saying in Louisiana is all those troubles are going on in other states, but we're just fine. And you'll see in a minute that the Louisiana Legislative Auditor has shown that Louisiana has never audited the results of an election because they can't audit the results of an election. Imagine if no one ever audited the finances. I know Shreveport and Bossier don't have any corruption, right? But imagine if you never did an audit of the books of local government entities in Shreveport and Bossier. What could you report?
All right,
There's no fraud here.
But let me pause right there. So
Sure.
for the sake of our viewers, define audit or clarify what a true, because we hear this all the time. They've been audited or this has been audited. What is your definition or what is the definition of auditing a vote?
I worked in industry for 30 years. I've been through hundreds of audits. I used to sign the financial statements of the company, a $150 million company. The financial statements were 7 inches high. An audit requires, and I'll use inventory. There's an electronic record of the inventory in a store, right? Let's call it community coffee. So there's an inventory of coffee, physical packages, and there is an electronic record in the accounting department. You must count the physical product to match it against the inventory records that are showing on the books in the computer. Same thing in your local government. There's cash that's taken in, cash and checks. Let's say for your local recreation department, there's an electronic record of that, and you have to match the physical paper receipts with the electronic records. In Louisiana, 90% of our elections, of our votes, have absolutely no paper record, none. So there is no way that you can match a paper ballot to an electronic record, meaning that you cannot audit Louisiana elections. And here's a kicker. 10% of the vote in Louisiana was 9.7% in the presidential election of 2020. Those are on paper ballots. Now, you would think that a serious State Department would audit, take those 9.7% paper ballots from 2020 and match it against the electronic record, right? Guess what? They didn't do it, and they've never done it, according to the legislative auditor. That's not me saying it. So the question for citizens is, if you have a paper record of a vote, the absentee ballots which are mailed in, why not audit those against the vote tally? Those ballots are scanned in to Dominion tabulators, and they're put into the Dominion election management system, which is a database. So you can audit it just like packages of coffee or automobiles or parts or anything. This is so common and so basic in business. Every business in Shreveport, Bossier, conducts audits at some point during the year.
All right, so, and we could go down a whole bunch of rabbit holes. So, how accurate, because I used to be a project manager for a boat company, I was a purchasing agent, blah, 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 and all that good stuff.
Mhm.
And there are a lot of individual parts that go into building a bass boat, including a lot of screws and rivets. You
Right.
don't count every screw and rivet. You
Of
just
course.
don't.
Of
And
course.
generally, what we did was weight them so that we would have an approximate to reconcile to our inventory. And we
Mhm.
knew that there was X percentage of waste. You know, you can't ever say there's going to be this exact amount of waste per thing that you're building. So, how accurate do you think, and does your group think we should be able to get elections? Are you advocating for 100% accuracy?
As close to that as you can get. You know, in any system there is slack or inaccuracy, but we see and we've done some testing of a secure hand count system, which we've been developing for a couple of years. We see accuracy rates of 99.8% in a 14 race ballot, paper ballot that's hand counted. So we believe that you can approach 100%. And in many cases, you can achieve it. Some you will not. But you should be north of 99.75%.
Now, Randy, that's kind of jumping way ahead,
Right.
but you said we believe. Um, whether you believe it or not doesn't change the fact that what you're saying there is actually being done. It's
It is.
not a
We've done it. We've done
it's
it.
not it's not speculation.
No. And the system that we have has actually been implemented in Osage County, Missouri, by our colleague Linda Rance from Missouri. We worked with patriots from Florida, Texas, and Missouri last October, perfecting this hand count system. And so it's being rolled out in counties in Missouri right now. So this is not theoretical.
Yeah, so we've jumped way ahead
Yeah,
here,
and
and
I would get to that in the end. So we'll have some slides that we'll just flip through real quick because we already did them.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to jump ahead, Rex, to this Gyra slide. I think it'll be slide number 8, and because I think Randy's really got some really good points to make on this right here. That'll be folks will want to hear what he has to say on this one.
All right, did you say number 6?
Number 8.
Number 8, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was trying to watch the comments too. And let me say this real quick. With Randy's permission, we will post this presentation on Bossier Watch after the
Sure.
show.
Sure, that'd be fine. Yeah, and so if we don't get to something, people can read it. Much of it is self-explanatory. So I draw your attention to the right-hand side of this slide. On January 6, 2017, the Obama-Biden administration declared state election systems critical infrastructure, resulting in federal regulation and control of our election systems. Now, this was literally 2 weeks before the Obama Biden administration left office. That had the effect of placing Louisiana's election system under the regulation and control of the Department of Homeland Security. They are most notable today for securing our southern border. That was a joke. So the same people that are saying our border is secure are the ones who are responsible for our electronic voting systems in Louisiana. How is that done? It's done through the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, and CISA working with the Countering Foreign Influence Task Force, which is made up of the FBI, the State Department, and others, developed a system called Gyro, which is a private software cloud-based project management system. And that system is accessible via the Center for Internet Security. I'm on the right-hand side now, who is a 501c3, East Greenbush, New York. They share office space with the World Economic Forum Global Cyber Alliance. CIS developed the portal that the National Association of Secretaries of State and Election Directors, which is in the bottom right-hand side, those two associations have direct access to file complaints against citizens for misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. And in fact, we have slides in the presentation from Connecticut of just that happening, just from the Twitter files. The Election Integrity Partnership is the Atlantic Council, which is a NATO organization, Stanford Internet Observatory, Stanford University, Graphica, which is a private company, and the University of Washington. Those people are the ones who put together the basic structure for the complaint filing system, which is known as EISIC, the Election Infrastructure Information Sharing and Analysis Center, which is run by the Center for Internet Security. That portal, through Gyra, sends messages to the social media companies, and you'll see in a moment in emails from the Twitter files that not only is Twitter contacted, but the FBI and other government agencies are involved in this. And I learned that other government agencies refer to intelligence agencies. So here we have the senior state election officers and election directors, secretaries of state, and directors of elections identified in the U.S. Congress as colluding to censor their own citizens. That is a violation of the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, and it should make every citizen concerned that these people have their hands on our election systems.
So one, and this is a simple point. What's the significance of January 6, 2017?
Well, that's a date that's maybe going to go down in infamy because there's another January 6th, right? This is the one no one wants to talk about.
I don't think a lot of people even put the importance of this particular January 6th. I don't think they realize the importance and the significance of it. But I mean, there's a reason Obama Biden did this on this date. Wasn't it the
Right.
last day they were going to have the opportunity to?
It's pretty close to the last day they had the opportunity to do it. So they unleashed the federal government in all of its power to regulate state election systems. Just think about that for a moment.
A lot of acronyms.
Yep. Well, why do they do that, do you think, Rex? Why do they have all these acronyms and
Well,
so on?
I could go back to my Burt Gummer video from the movie Tremors. Now, I don't know if
Hmm.
you've ever seen that. It's a
I
story
missed
about
that one.
these story with Kevin Bacon and anyway, these giant worms that bore through the ground. But the point is that he has a quote in there where he says, basically, you guys from the government take something that should be so simple and make it complicated. And
Hmm.
I would argue that that's the whole goal of the government, period.
That's the goal, is no one can figure this out. And they never thought that Twitter files would be released. That was their miscalculation.
Randy, where do you want to jump ahead to on the
Yeah,
slides now?
just flip to the next one, and I'll tell you if we need to just skip it. Okay, here, this is a busy slide, but it's very important. I've took my spectacles off. The bottom line is basically the federal government role in all of this. You see in 2018, the Center for Internet Security put up the election infrastructure EISIC, which is the portal to file complaints against citizens. The Election Integrity Partnership set up the portal, formalized it in 2020. Then they issued a report. These guys were so arrogant, they issued a 190-page report on everything that they did called the long fuse. You can go and look that up. It's publicly available. And then the thing that they didn't anticipate is Missouri and Louisiana suing the Biden administration and deposing all these senior officials and getting discovery of all these documents, that some of which I have in this presentation. What's important for Louisiana is to notice on the top line, Secretary of State Kyle Ardoin was acting Secretary of State in May of 2018 when Tom Shedler resigned. He was elected Secretary of State in a special election December of 2018, elected in a regular election 11 November of 19, and then he immediately becomes treasurer of the National Association. Then in 2020, he's president-elect, and in 2021, he becomes president, and he also becomes co-chair of the Cybersecurity Committee, and he becomes co-chair of the CISA, that should be CISA, Government Coordinating Council. So the Government Coordinating Council is all the election system vendors, the law enforcement, nonprofits are coordinating cybersecurity. They use Russian interference, which has now been thoroughly debunked. They used Russian interference as the predicate for putting all of this monitoring in place. And the monitoring is directed at at American citizens. So Kyle Ardoin, and this is one of the problems of why the LFRW started censoring me, is I pointed out something that's factual. This is all public record. And in addition to that, I mentioned earlier that in Louisiana, members of EISIC, which gives you the opportunity and the availability to file censorship complaints against your own citizens, the members of that are the Caldwell Clerk of Court, Jefferson Parish Clerk of Court, St. Tammany, Calcasieu, Lafourche Clerk of Court, the East Baton Rouge Registrar of Voters, and the St. Mary Registrar of Voters. When we publish these names in Lafayette Parish, uh, the Center for Internet Security the very next day took the membership list off of their website. Now,
Wow.
if this was all legitimate, why would you want to hide your membership list?
Wow.
Right?
Hmm. The rabbit hole deepens.
Right.
So the LF
So what we see, Kyle is still the co-chair of the election infrastructure subsector government coordinating council, and he's still the co-chair of the NAS cybersecurity committee, and it's the cybersecurity function that is used as the ruse to censor American citizens.
So the LFRW, I mean, I'm wondering, were a lot of those names that were on that list, were they, I guess, members of the LFRW? Is that maybe?
You know what was explained to me before my final presentation on January 9th to the Acadiana or the Fleur de Lis Club in Lafayette is you can't make any disparaging remarks about a Republican elected official. And I said, I'm presenting facts. I'm not making disparagement. I'm not saying he's a bad person. I'm saying that this is what he was involved in.
For the record, we say lots of disparaging things about lots of Republicans all the time, but as a side note.
Yeah.
And as a result, we're called lots of disparaging things,
Yeah.
but that's
Yeah.
okay.
Well, I'm a professor, so I try to be, I'm not a political guy. I look at facts. I do research. I dig. I do homework, and so this is facts. Everything that your audience is seeing, they can go verify this. They can look this up. So
Well,
next
well,
slide,
look, go ahead.
or if you do, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna jump us way ahead to the state constitution. There's a slide in there, but in between there, if there's something really important you want to touch on, let's go there.
Yeah, let's
Yeah,
talk about this Twitter files first.
Yeah, the Twitter files, this came out just in December. This particular piece is Matt Taibbi, who was one of the first two journalists to get access to the Twitter files. And basically, he says that Twitter is an FBI subsidiary. So Twitter's contact with the FBI was so constant and pervasive as FBI personnel, mainly in the San Francisco field office, regularly sent lists of reports to Twitter, often about Americans with low follower counts making joke tweets. Tweeters on both the left and right were affected. FBI was adamant no impediments exist to sharing classified information. Twitter also agreed to bounce content on recommendations of a wide array of governmental and quasi-government actors, from the FBI to Homeland Security, CISA, to Stanford Election Integrity Project, to state governments. So here we have a nexus, a connection between state governments, Stanford Election Integrity Project, and CISA, a part of Homeland Security. The company one day, meaning Twitter, received so many moderation requests, and moderation is the euphemism for censorship, from the FBI. An executive congratulated staffers at the end for completing the monumental undertaking. So these Twitter files have clearly established from the records of Twitter that the FBI, Homeland Security, CISA, universities, and state governments conspired to turn in their own citizens for censorship.
Do you have any copies, and maybe it's in the next slide, do you have any copies of examples of some of
Yes.
these tweets that were moderated or censored?
We have examples of the request for the tweets in this presentation.
Okay. All right, we ready for next slide?
Yeah, next slide.
All right.
So here's a request that arrived and were escalated from all over, from Treasury Department, the NSA, virtually every state, from HHS, from the FBI, DHS, and more. And these are examples, and this is from Matt's his Twitter account, where you can go and look these up. I've only excerpted some of them, and the print's too small for you to read. So I would refer you to Matt's Twitter account at mtaibbi, and you can go read all of these for yourself. But these are examples of the request to have things censored. Next slide. Twitter Files Part 9, Twitter and other government agencies. This details how channels of communication between the federal government and Twitter operated, and reveals that Twitter directly or indirectly received lists of flagged content from, quote, other government agencies, which is generally known in the government to be the CIA. Now, what's the problem with the CIA turning in lists of American citizens to be censored?
I thought that they were responsible for foreign actors. I didn't think they were supposed to be dealing with American citizens.
Correct. That is correct. So, key revelations: CIA officials attended at least one conference with Twitter in the summer of 2020, and companies like Twitter and Facebook received other government agency briefings at their regular industry meetings held in conjunction with the FBI, DHS. The FBI and the Foreign Influence Task Force met regularly, not just with Twitter, but Yahoo, LinkedIn, etc. So this is all platforms, social media platforms are involved in this. Next slide. And here's an example, tweet 24 from Taibbi, December 24th. This is the all government requests for censorship. So you can next slide. So here's an example of a specific state government. This is from 2022. This is Connecticut Secretary of State Merrill. She joins NAS, the National Association of Secretary of State, in the hashtag Trusted Info 2022 voter education effort. This is a press release that her office published. What we see in here is the Election Assistance Commission, which is the regulator and certifier of voting machines, is giving grants to secretaries of state to hire misinformation specialists. What's a misinformation specialist? That's someone who monitors their own citizens and turns them in through the portal to be censored. And I refer you to the red type. The Office of the Secretary also used federal funding to hire a misinformation specialist for the duration of the 2020 election to identify, report, and combat election misinformation found online and in social media, working with federal law enforcement, which would be the FBI, and various social media platforms. The Office of the Secretary and the misinformation specialists were able to quickly find and remove election misinformation before it could spread. Gentlemen, this is the person responsible for election equipment and running elections in Connecticut that's turning in their own citizens to be censored for speech that they don't like.
Who determines what the misinformation is? Who qualifies what information or what misinformation actually is?
The misinformation specialist probably has someone above them approve the list of sites and users. I'll use Twitter users and their tweets, and they send that to Twitter. Twitter has I think they call it the Truth and Security Department, and that department vets those requests for censorship. The FBI, as far as I can see, is almost always copied on those lists. So the list of citizens to be censored go both to Twitter and the FBI. And as I understand it, the FBI then looks at those for possible inclusion on the domestic terrorist watch list.
Do we have any indication since Elon took over Twitter that we should be referring to some of this in the past tense? Because he canned a lot of people and a lot of people quit.
Yeah, there's I was not really on social media until I got on for Twitter files. It appears as though there's still some algorithms working there that are doing some automated censoring. But Yoel Roth, for example, the head of the Truth and Security Department, he's gone, and James Baker is gone, the former FBI General Counsel. It's funny how FBI and CIA people end up working in these big tech companies in very high level positions. But those guys are gone. And Yoel Roth was called before the House Oversight Committee to testify in front of Miss Luna, actually. And that infographic that Duke put up, that actually was shown, and he was questioned. Yoel Roth was questioned about the censorship activities at Twitter.
And I would like to remind everybody as we finish on through this, this actually is nothing new in the collusion between government and private companies. As we all know, AT&T literally gave the NSA a room so that they could plug into all of our phone calls and phone conversations and vacuum them all up. So
I just realized it was dark in here.
well, I thought you were going for effect there. It's ominous information that we've got going here.
Somebody came and took me away. So here is an email from the Connecticut Secretary of State, Denise Merrill, from the General Counsel of the Secretary of State of Connecticut to Twitter, copying the FBI. Please see below. Our election information security analyst came across some suspicious accounts that are ostensibly Connecticut-based and attempting to look officialist. So this is an actual transmission, an email from the Secretary of State to Twitter, copying the FBI, requesting that these accounts be looked at.
Well, but let me play devil's advocate for a second.
Sure.
So, what is the problem if the Connecticut Secretary of State does come across some accounts that are trying to be fake profile accounts and look official? I mean, we all see the satire pages for City of Bossier, City of Shreveport, City of West Monroe. We all have them. There was one recently, I think it was City of Longview or Tyler or something, that everybody went nuts because they shared out something and they thought it was from an official city deal. What is the problem here with trying to vet or root some of those out?
I don't think there's a problem with that. But when we look at lists of citizens and organizations that have been censored, they all are conservative. The Gateway Pundit, Tucker Carlson, etc. The censorship, from what my research shows, is one way, and it's very specific, big audience, often big audience, but not always. Conservative outlets are being censored. So it's very clear that the government is putting its finger on the scale of information, and certainly, bogus sites that claim to be the City of Bossier, those should be dealt with, and I agree with that. But satire and conservative viewpoints deserve space in a constitutional republic. Because if we can't speak, then we no longer have a free republic.
I keep having all these rabbit holes to go down. So let me present another question. So this email is dated October 26th of 2020, which is shortly before the election, the presidential election.
Right.
That means that these people were in place under the Trump administration. And, full disclosure, I voted for Trump twice. Uh, but that also means that they had to. I mean, it's not like somebody flipped a switch one night and everybody got together and jumped into positions of power here. It doesn't work that way. These people had to be put in place into positions of power. And arguably, that means that they had to be put in place in positions of power under the Trump administration and the Republican controlled Congress that he held for the first 2 years.
Well,
Has
you have
anybody
to
thought
keep in
about that?
mind. Well, you have to keep in mind that there is a permanent bureaucracy in Washington,
Yeah.
and many of those people go from administration to administration. Certainly, the appointees at the highest level, are appointed by the president. But we know that the people that are now in the spotlight in many of these things going on with various things against President Trump. They have been in government. Jim Comey is one of them. James Comey, John Brennan, James Clapper. All these guys are government hacks. That's what they do. They go from administration to administration. So I think it's not quite accurate to say that Trump, is responsible for all of this, in the sense that there is a permanent bureaucracy that we see operating. And Trump had many distractions, in case you've forgotten that.
And I'm not trying to accuse Trump. I'm just trying to, going back to my original um, thought that this has been going on. It's nothing new, and it didn't start with Trump.
No,
It's just that
certainly not.
it's coming to a head with Trump, and I would argue coinciding with the drastic rise of social media, as we're seeing here, being used in nefarious ways, but also in
Right.
positive ways, for us to be able to get this information and share it and be able to communicate with other like-minded people, whether
Sure.
whether
Sure.
they're like us or not, or whatever.
Right.
All right. Sorry about that.
So the key here for people to take away is the National Association of Secretaries of State participated in a government sponsored program which gave them a portal run by a 501c3, the Center for Internet Security, that allows them to turn in their own citizens for moderation of misinformation. That's the key. Next slide. So we already talked about this. So is this going on in Louisiana? Well, I attended at an invitation from We the People Bayou Community, December 8th in Homa. Click the next slide. This is how it was posted on YouTube. It was live stream, and then, as I understand it, it gets posted. December mixer, election integrity, speaker, Randy Russ. Next slide. This video has been removed for violating YouTube's policy of harassment and bullying. Now, my demeanor is always as you gentlemen are seeing right now. In fact, we had a little bit of I'll say, mild controversy at the RPEC Bossier meeting, right, Duke? Like, and my demeanor was what?
Just like it is now, professional, calm, cool, collective.
Right. And yet this is 2023, January 9th, the day after. Was it January? Flip back. Is it January or December? December.
Let's see. Yeah.
December.
December.
Yeah, December. This is late 2022. YouTube is censoring a guy like me for presenting stuff like this on a channel that has like 18 people. Now, in the last week, YouTube has come out and said we're no longer going to moderate election integrity material. So they're admitting that they've been censoring this stuff, and they're now no longer going to do it. So we'll see if this exercise gets censored or not.
Have you tried since then to repost that video?
I have not.
Send us a
So next
copy.
slide.
We'll post it.
Next slide. So here's a quote from the Jeff Landry lawsuit, October 6th, 2022. This is from the discovery in that lawsuit. This is the CISA director. Remember, CISA is the DHS entity that regulates and has control of our state election system. With specific reference to hotly disputed election integrity issues, which comprise core political speech, Easterly stated, Americans should not be allowed to pick their own facts and make their own decisions about what is true, especially regarding election security. We now live in a world where people talk about alternative facts, post-truth, which I think is really, really dangerous if you get to pick your own facts.
So
Hang on,
I want to read that sentence again slowly for
and it's
all of-
particularly corrosive when you talk about matters of election security. Instead, she indicated federal officials like herself should intervene to help Americans, quote, pick the right facts. Guys, this is not me saying this. This is in the Jeff Landry lawsuit, paragraph 293.
Yeah, all of you sitting in the back row, let me read that part again to you. Americans should not be allowed to pick their own facts and make their own decisions about what is true, especially regarding election security. You shouldn't have the ability to make your own decision.
I'm more hung up on the right facts phrase there because that seems a little redundant to me. I mean, if they're facts, they're right. But
y'all
but
think
here,
about that sentence a little bit. Think hard on it.
all right, so I'm going to go off on a tangent for a second. Rein me back in here in a minute, Duke, if I go too long. But I think the real key and problem here is we have an issue in our country of determining what are facts and what are not. And let me give you a perfect example. So you hear the phrase, my truth, all the time. And it drives me, pardon the phrase, batshit crazy. Because it's either the truth or it's not. I mean, so I think the challenge here is, just like she says, or this quote says, pick the right facts. Unfortunately, we have gone into this area where people think they can have their own little realm and bubble of factual security and whatever, and think that they're safe inside their little bubbles. You either have the facts and have the truth or not. It's pretty cut and dried.
Right.
And if you call them out or you point out an alternative set of facts, they get butthurt over it. Case in point, and I'm going to harp on it because it irritates me, the LFRW. They didn't like what this man was putting out in a report. It was facts, and they got butthurt over it. I mean,
Well, they got butthurt because they have to walk lock, stock, and barrel and follow the Republican Party, whatever that actually is these days.
anyway.
So, gentlemen, it should be concerning to every Louisiana citizen that Jen Easterly, who's due to be deposed in the Landry lawsuit, the administration has tried to keep her from being deposed. You can see why now. But this should be disturbing because this is the person who thinks that Americans should not be allowed to make decisions. Well, our vote is one of the most important decisions that we make as citizens. And this is the person who regulates and controls state election systems. Next slide.
All right, let's go.
Skip to one.
So who keeps our voter rolls and counts our votes? I'm getting down to the meat, Duke. Back up one.
Let me go back one slide. I think I skipped ahead 2 slides. So the
Yeah,
next one
go
after
one.
that one is that one right there.
Okay. Louisiana election results have never been audited and cannot be audited, yet our election officials claim our election results are accurate. This is from the Louisiana Legislative Auditor Performance Audit Series, March 9th, 2022. The key here is how DOS conducts post-election verification activities to ensure that the number of votes cast do not exceed the number of eligible voters and matches voter turnout. That's just counting the counter in the machine versus who signed up on the poll book. That's just a count of numbers, head count. However, Louisiana's current in-person voting systems do not produce a paper record, which prevents DOS from conducting post-election tabulation audits. So neither the early voting machines, which are Dominion image cast machines, modern machines, nor the day of votings, which are the old 1991 Diebold machines, DREs, neither of those produce an audit trail, which means the results of 90% of our elections have never been audited because they can't be audited. And so it would be ludicrous for me to represent to the Department of Revenue that I don't owe any taxes and I'm clean because I don't have any records, right?
Right. So
sounds like a great plan to me.
Here we go down.
Try it, Duke, and see what happens.
Here we go down the rabbit hole again. So I watched the video with you, Randy, and two other gentlemen that's on YouTube. Mm-hmm. And in that video, I'm paraphrasing loosely, so bear with me here. But I don't think it was you, but one of the gentlemen basically alluded to getting away from the secret ballot. Because if you think about it, the only way to truly audit this is if we can identify a voter with a voting record. Because otherwise, they're simply numbers that can be manipulated. So
I wouldn't agree with that, because if you have a secure serialized paper ballot, you can and the serial numbers, and we tested this last May in St. Tammany Parish. We have a inventory control system that you load in electronically a series of serial numbers for ballots, just like parts. A ballot is a part. Each ballot has a serial number. You issue those ballots to a jurisdiction, let's say Bossier Parish, and then all of those ballots are scanned after they're hand counted. Those in a comparative audit software, you can validate that the ballots that were scanned were the ones that were authorized to be used in Bossier Parish. Both the ones that were completed by voters and the ones that were blank or were scrapped, were soiled, voided. You can, just like a checkbook, checks. You remember in the old days, you had numbered checks. This is common. And you had a bank statement, and you had all the check numbers, and the check numbers should be in sequence. If they're out of sequence, you knew it. If one was missing, you went to your checkbook and you said, oh, I voided that one. It shouldn't be represented in my bank statement. So this is very common sense. We've been doing this for, I've been in business for, 45 years. And these processes are very well documented and used every day. So I don't think anonymity has to be gotten rid of in order to do a complete audit.
So let me play devil's advocate again for a minute. So you mentioned having machine counting.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that reconcile with paper ballots? I mean, what I'm asking is, what is your interpretation? And maybe it's on the slides. I keep jumping ahead.
Yeah, we're gonna get to your question. Okay. So why don't you hold that one? We'll get there, and I promise we'll answer it. So in red is what's really important. In addition, the Department of State does not currently conduct post-election tabulation audits on absentee ballots, which do produce a voter-verified paper record. So here's a simple question. If you're going around the state claiming that our election results are accurate and you have 10% of our vote in paper ballots, why aren't you verifying that against the Dominion scanner database? Why? Why wouldn't you audit if you have a paper record like a package of coffee or a steering wheel, an inventory of steering wheels for the bass boats? Why wouldn't you count that and compare it to the electronic record of how many steering wheels your accounting system says you have?
The only time I can think of that we did that where it was not completely dependent on the software, at least in Bossier Parish, is on the mail-in ballots, because those, by necessity, are not secret ballots at that point. So,
well, you separate the envelope. You separate the envelope,
but
you anonymize the ballot
and
itself.
You're not really supposed to look, all that kind of good stuff. But my point is, and I'll get to another point here in a second, that's the only time where I can think of that the number of those votes was physically counted by hand, or could have been. Let me rephrase that.
Yeah,
Could have been. And that compared to the machine tabulation. And if those numbers don't match, then we've got an issue somewhere.
Right. And so what we're asking is, if you have the ability to do an audit of 100% of the absentee paper ballots against what the Dominion election management system recorded as the results, why are you not doing that?
Bingo.
True.
And
I agree.
in business, when a manager refuses to participate or cooperate in an audit, or when a manager wants to delay an audit or has excuses about an audit, it's always a sign of potential fraud.
Absolutely. So let me go circle back for a second. Hold on, Duke.
Mm-hmm.
It says in there in red, which do produce a voter verified paper record. So clarify, what is a voter verified paper record?
The absentee ballot is a paper ballot. The voter marks it, and they can look at it and make sure, yes, I voted for Hillary Clinton. I voted for Duke for dog catcher of Lower Bossier Parish. I voted for Rex, for parish president, because he can railroad Duke to, go pick up his hunting dogs for him, on parish payroll time. So voter verified means that I completed the ballot and I can see my intent and confirm it. In this case, before I fold it and put it in the envelope, seal the envelope, sign it, have my, witness sign it, all the things that have to be done.
Okay.
And quite frankly, our mail-in ballot system in Louisiana, our absentee ballot system is pretty good and pretty tight. And so, we've said where we're doing good, we want to say we're doing good. We have voter ID. That's good. A lot of states don't have it.
Agreed.
Next. So who keeps our voter rolls and counts our votes? The key thing to take away here is the state outsources almost every function to an out-of-state vendor that is owned by a private equity company that is not subject to public records request. We don't know who owns them, and we don't know who funds them. So let's start with voter registration. The registrar of voters appointed by the parish council is responsible for voter registration. They outsource to the Secretary of State, who outsources to Civics. Civics was acquired by a private equity firm, HKW of Indianapolis, in 2017. There's the reference if you want to go see who that is. The Civics registration database was shared with ERIC, the Electronic Registration Information Center, to clean the voter rolls. ERIC was funded by the Soros Open Society via the Pew Center for the States in 2012. Kyle Ardoin, with our help, suspended participation in ERIC in March of 2022, and ERIC has now been canceled by 8 other states. What's not on here is ERIC shared all of our private personal information with the Center for Election Innovation and Research, CEIR. That is a Zuckerberg funded nonprofit. We have conducted analysis and actual physical canvasses in 2 parishes, and we estimate that as much as 1 in 5 of our voter registrations are ineligible or, in fact, illegal. Member states of ERIC, I'll give you Wisconsin, an ERIC state that was supposed to clean up their voter rolls. They have 4 million eligible voters in Wisconsin. And in 2021, they had 7 million registered voters. 4 million eligible voters, 7 million registrations, almost double. So this system, our election officials tell us, trust the process. This process has produced very dirty voter rolls. And it's all outsourced to a private company who's not subject to public disclosure and who actually sent our voter rolls to a Zuckerberg funded entity.
Now, Randy, I mean, our Secretary of State's office has said in the past that we've got good voter rolls, that's not a fair charge. Is it accurate or inaccurate that they've since in the legislature had to, I guess you could say, walk that back a little bit?
They walked it back. First Assistant Secretary Nancy Landry, I was in the committee hearing for House Bill 159. It was earlier in May, about the second week of May. And she admitted that they have found over 180,000 suspect registrations, including persons over 110 years old. And this is all the while they've been going around. That's 6% of our voter rolls. We have 2.9 and change million registered voters as of May of this year. So that's 6% of our voter rolls. I was in a speech today that she gave, and she's still saying that our voter rolls are 99.75% accurate, when she herself admitted in front of the House Governmental Affairs Committee that 6% are suspect and need to be dealt with. Now, they're talking out of multiple sides of their mouths, unfortunately. We estimate that number, and this is based on analysis by national experts and people in Louisiana, including me, that we estimate about 20% of our voter rolls are suspect.
Well, I'm gonna go on out here and I'm gonna say this. I mean, and a reason that I pointed that out is because I've talked to Nancy on the phone before in the past before COVID about trying to do some things to election integrity before it was cool to be doing election integrity. I was way out there early, and but she was in favor of it at that time, and I had a good conversation with her. But interestingly, now, and it's even more interestingly that you're saying that she's saying that for the most part we're clean, but she admitted in a committee hearing that we've got a problem. She's running for Secretary of State, and she has been down there in the hot seat overseeing all this. And
she's a lawyer, and she's a former state representative, and she's been there 4 years.
I mean, I'm guessing that the LFRWs are not going to have any problem with her coming in and saying that, hey, we've got everything's great and peachy and it's going to be blue skies tomorrow. I guess that's not a problem, right?
I guess not. Well, let me say something about LFRW. Individual clubs have started inviting me to come, and so they were quite frankly upset about censorship, a Republican organization censoring other Republican citizens who are simply presenting facts that can all be verified. And what I always say is, hey, I can make a mistake. And I was taught a long time ago, son, when you mess up, fess up, fix it, and move on. So if I'm wrong, I'll admit that I'm wrong and I made an error, but I'm not going to go around representing things like the Secretary of State has been doing, that our voter rolls are 99.75% accurate. He himself signed an agreement in New Orleans when the recall was going on with the mayor down there to with the stroke of a pen, move about 30,000 voters, which was 10% of New Orleans rolls, stroke of the pen, move those voters to inactive on the rolls. Okay,
Wow.
so if the rolls are accurate, why did he do that? Move 10% of the voters to inactive. So,
Great.
election systems. Let's move over to the machine side, which I think is where you guys wanted to spend a little time. The registrar of voters for early voting and absentee, and the clerk of court for election day voting outsources to the Secretary of State, who outsources voting machines to Dominion Voting Systems of Denver, Colorado. Their global headquarters are in Toronto, Canada, with software operations in Serbia. They were acquired by private equity firm Staple Street Capital of New York in 2018. There's the reference to that. Dominion assigned its voting technology patents to the Hong Kong Shanghai Bank of UK, Canada as collateral in 2019. And then the Swiss Chinese UBS of Hong Kong invested $400 million in Staple Street Capital in 2020 and the patents were collateralized as part of these transactions. So here we have a Canadian headquartered company with software operations in Serbia. You can go on Google Maps and you can see where Dominion, the actual street address of Dominion's Serbian operations. They're owned by a hedge fund company, and they have extensive banking with entities that are, shall we say, affiliated with a foreign country. In addition, and this is not in this presentation, the Canadian headquarters building where Dominion is located shares a floor with a Soros-funded 501c3. And that is courtesy of you've heard of Project Veritas?
Right.
Oh, yeah.
James O'Keefe. Rebel News is the James O'Keefe of Canada. And Rebel News staked out Dominion's headquarters, and there's a video on it from Rebel News where you can see the Soros entity next door to Dominion and all of that. So this is who controls. When we ask audiences who counts our votes, well, Rex, who counts your votes in Bossier Parish?
Well, apparently it's those darn Canadians.
It's the software. So then the next question is, who wrote the software?
Right.
The answer is we don't know, because they won't let us look at the software. Next slide.
Canadians again.
So cybersecurity. So who manages cybersecurity and information security? We'll go through this real quick because we've already talked about it. It's a story of outsourcing. Registrar of Voters and Clerks outsource to Secretary of State, who outsources to the Division of Administration, who outsources to the Department of Homeland Security, who outsources to CISA, who outsources to the Center for Internet Security, a New York-based private 501c3. The Center for Internet Security has installed real-time monitoring systems on over 95% of state and parish level election management systems nationwide. These are referred to as Albert sensors. What real-time monitoring means, and we have copies of these agreements, is the Center for Internet Security can look behind the firewall And Rex, you're a tech guy. You know what I just said. If you can look behind the firewall, that means you can look at the databases and so on. We had a cybersecurity expert at, let me back up. Last year at the GOP convention, Dr. Douglas Frank, one of the national experts that we work with, Kyle Ardoin asked to meet with him. So we set up a meeting at Christy Hike's house. She's one of our activists here in Baton Rouge. Kyle, Dr. Douglas Frank, who's a Nobel nominated scientist. He's about my age, so he has 40 years of PhD level activity. He asked Kyle if he could call a white hat hacker to hack into Louisiana's election management system, which is the database with the votes. Kyle gave him okay, and the white hat hacker, who is one of the expert witnesses in Kari Lake's trial in Arizona, got into our election management system in 3 minutes.
Now, Randy, I understand that Kyle Ardoin is saying that that's not true, that didn't happen,
Right.
that's all a big lie. I mean,
the problem he has is there are 3 witnesses.
Well, I mean, would Nancy Landry have known this?
Nancy Landry was asked about that today by Christy Hike, and Nancy Landry said, "Well, I wasn't there. I don't know about that."
She was
asked point blank today.
Wow.
So these real-time monitoring systems allow a 501c3 nonprofit that is funded by the Department of Homeland Security to look behind the firewall real time as Louisiana elections are occurring. I said this already. The Center for Internet Security shares offices in East Greenbush, New York, with the Global Cyber Alliance, which is a World Economic Forum funded entity with offices in New York, London, and Brussels. Now let's go over to the right-hand side. Information security to combat MDM, misinformation, disinformation, etc. The Registrar of Voters and Clerks outsource to the Secretary of State, who outsources to the Department of Homeland Security, who outsources to CISA, who outsources to the Center for Internet Security. Now notice the same people who have access behind the firewall are also the ones who work with the Election Integrity Partnership, who provide the JIRA censorship portal to the National Association of Secretaries of State and election directors, who are able to file complaints against their own citizens in violation of the First Amendment with social media companies, Department of Justice, FBI, etc. And the U.S. Election Assistance Commission, the EAC, provides grants to those offices for social media monitoring and reporting, what we saw from Connecticut. So the same 501c3 that is monitoring interference in our elections real time with access behind the firewall is the same entity identified by Jeff Landry, by the U.S. Congress, and the Twitter files as setting up the censorship portal that allows secretaries of state and others to file complaints against their own citizens.
We have any idea of how many complaints have been filed?
There are various estimates, but we know that 22 million social media posts were removed in 2021, I believe. It's tens of millions of posts.
Well, this next slide is really the one I've kind of been waiting on.
There you go. Why don't you read it, dude? Go ahead.
Well, This is a section of the Louisiana Constitution, and the part that really jumps out is the part that you have highlighted that says ballots shall be counted publicly. Now, at first, I mean, this one has really ate at me, and then I got to thinking about it a little more, and I jumped up there, and there's the part that I didn't read there. It says secret ballot, absentee voting, preservation of ballot. So then I got to thinking, well, maybe this just applies just to the absentee ballots, and that was a question I was going to pose to you. But on the surface, if this means that all ballots in an election in Louisiana are by the Constitution supposed to be counted publicly, I don't know that we do that.
Well, who counts your votes?
But let me
Well-
interject a little bit here. So, and I can only speak to Bossier Parish, but let me be careful how I say this. The process of ballot counting is absolutely open to the public. You can come up there and be sequestered in just like everybody else.
For only 10% of the ballots, which are the absentee ballots.
That's why I said the process. So
Right.
the process of tabulating the electronic results and them being sent to the Secretary of State's office electronically, and the process of viewing those printouts and any questions that the Board of Election Supervisors have, and us actually signing off on those that's why I said process is absolutely open to the public.
Right.
The problem is, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, the problem is that those ballots are being counted electronically, and while we could, even if the code was open source, we couldn't see the actual transactions happening in real time, but at least we could audit the code and know that there was relative security in those elections. So I want to be clear that it is open to the public, but it's the
Right.
process that's open.
But what's not open to the public, so think about, so you scan 10% of the votes through that Dominion scanner, the absentee ballots, right?
Right.
But
Yep.
then there's the cartridges, the cartridge from the old machines, the day of voting. Those cartridges are loaded at the clerk of court and uploaded to the election management system. Is that public or not? It's not public.
Well, so the
The
actual,
cartridge, the cartridge transmission is not public.
well, you can
No.
stand in there. Yes, you can in Bossier.
Well,
Yes, sir, you can in Bossier, because we've actually had people do it. When
but-
the guy
but
from the Secretary of State's office is there and transmits that data.
but you don't know. No one has seen what's in that. In other words, there are no
Correct.
ballots.
Again,
There
I
are
said
no ballots.
I said the process.
Right.
So I want to be clear on what I am
Yeah, you're
advocating
clear.
here.
Yeah, you're clear. And then, of course, the touch screen, which is the early voting, the Dominion ICX machines, you're touching a screen and it's a DRE. It goes onto a thumb drive, and that thumb drive is uploaded. So let's go to the next slide, and we'll maybe. So this is the system, an example of an ES&S system that's being recommended, something like this for Louisiana. This is actually from their manual, election system and software, ES&S. So notice all of the arrows and diagrams and screens and computers and disk, servers and disks and all of that. Does this look like it would be a ballots counted publicly? I don't want to get into all the technology and who's doing what to who and what's being transmitted where, but just on its surface, does this look like it comports with the Constitution?
It doesn't look to me like it falls within the Louisiana Constitution. Ballots shall be counted publicly. It doesn't fall within those parameters for me.
And from a risk management standpoint, when you have this many arrows going around, I started my career in high tech. I worked for a small company in the early 80s called Apple Computer. You may have heard of them. But when an industrial engineer and a guy with all the training I have, when I see this many arrows and ways of going here and yon, from a security standpoint, particularly today, this is not good. So let's go to the next slide, and this may answer your question. So what's the solution? Return power to the people in the parish and the precinct, decentralize elections, eliminate third-party outsourcing, voter registration and maintenance at the parish level, secure hand-marked, hand-counted paper ballots with assistive technology for the disabled community, ballots tracked by unique serial number and available online for public inspection and recounting on the day of election. So we're not opposed to technology. We just think that local citizens in each precinct should count our own ballots, and then those ballots can be scanned both for retention purposes at the clerk of court's office, and then they can be maintained for the 24 months in physical paper form as per the law. That means that they can then be uploaded into the Secretary of State's system, and you can look at them. You could recount your precinct, you could recount your parish, you could have a party and do that. Those ballots are available. For example, the county and city of San Francisco puts all of their ballots up online within a day or two after an election. So this is not something that's crazy. Nancy Pelosi's county actually does it. Eliminate early voting and mail voting, except for military disabled. Return to election day and make it a state holiday. Restore citizen involvement in elections and have elections be duty, just like we have jury duty. We can't have functioning courts without jury duty. We believe to restore trust and have functioning elections, we can't outsource it to bureaucrats in Baton Rouge. I know y'all love Baton Rouge because I just heard y'all talk nice about us down here with Danny, but we bureaucrats in Baton Rouge shouldn't be running elections in Bossier Parish, Louisiana. Citizens in Bossier should be running your elections and counting your own votes and reporting those results certified to the Secretary of State. And we don't report results until every parish is finished counting. And that includes Orleans, because one of the tricks is the 2 a.m. vote drop from Orleans. They wait to see the returns and then they do a drop, which is, you've seen it. Y'all know it. It happens.
Yep.
And one of the ways they do that is they watch all the parish returns come in, and then they figure out what they need and they go get it. And that's how we've had, I think, John Bell Edwards for 2 terms, quite frankly. One of the ways.
I'm gonna play that devil's advocate thing that Rex has been doing here. So I'm from Bossier, and we get cut out of all the money that, excess money down there in the legislature. And so you're telling me that I should trust people of Baton Rouge to have a fair election and report fair results, the same as Orleans. And I'm a Bossier guy. I'm supposed to trust those people down there. And you get my point?
Yeah, I get your point. I'm saying you shouldn't trust anybody in Baton Rouge. Y'all should count your own votes in your own precincts and certify them. And since y'all are RPEC guys, let me tell you how this works. It's happening in Missouri right now. The Republican Party and the Democratic Party in Bossier Parish generates a list of activists who agree to serve as election commissioners to count, Republican and Democrat. Those people are vetted by the party. They're trained by the clerk of court in the hand count process, and the clerk picks registered voters from each party to form hand count teams of 4 people. The average precinct in Louisiana has 1,200 registered voters, average. If you have a 50% turnout, that's 600 ballots cast. We have counted a 14 item ballot, which is similar to a 2020 ballot, 2020 presidential. We counted that and counted 100 ballots in 40 minutes. So 600 ballots in an average precinct would take under 4 hours with 4 people counting. How does that work? You have a Republican and a Democrat on one side of the table, a Republican and Democrat on the other side. 2 of those people, one side of the table is the count sheet side. One side has the ballots, and they call out the vote by number, not by name. And you got a Republican and a Democrat looking at the ballot, a stack of 100 ballots, let's say, which came in first thing on election day. You start counting an hour or so after the polls open, depending on how big the precinct is. You start counting, you call out the number 1, 7, 12, 14. The counters both have independent count sheets, like a baseball pitch count sheet. We have a custom version that we created. And you dab a circle. There's a row of circles like a pitch count sheet, and it has a number in it. 1 vote, 2 votes, 3 votes, 4 votes, 5 votes. So as you dab it with a highlighter, you're recording that vote off that ballot. In Missouri, Osage County, they counted the entire county election in April, this April. They were done in all the precincts by 8:30. Polls closed at 8. One precinct had some problems, and they were finished at 10:30. So the vote was counted by citizens in the county. It was signed off and certified. And if there's ever any question, we know who to go ask, and we have a stack of ballots to recount. Simple, easy, transparent, and they're not loading the ballots onto the internet, onto the Secretary of State's website. But that's something that we feel strongly about, that will increase transparency and allow any citizen to go recount the vote. And again, San Francisco has their ballots. You can go look it up right now. I have that in another presentation. It's not in this one. So this is what we've tested, and will be coming soon to large parishes around the state, including Bossier, to demonstrate the hand count system, so that voters and public officials can kick the tires and see what we're talking about.
Yeah, because one of the arguments is, and literally I heard an elected official in Bossier say, and I'm not going to call that person out by name, but they said, what do we want? Do we really want people to sit here and be thumbing through a stack of ballots, counting 1, 2, 3, 4, and they were trying to, describe the process or imprint a process that's actually not what's being proposed. But you guys, and what you just described is something that's already being done in other places, and it's been proven that it works and is effective. Correct?
Yeah, we have a 200 plus page manual from Missouri, from our friends there, and so we're not. This is not theoretical. This is not some goofballs, election deniers that with their hair on fire. We're serious people. I'm an industrial engineer, and I have 30 years of experience running processes and doing audits and inventories. And we had an industrial engineer and a CPA come up from Florida and work with us in October on the hand count that we did then. And we'll be doing another motion and time study, and we're actually filming it probably a week from this Friday. And so that film will be a training film that we'll use for citizens to be able to show their friends and family how this works. And we'll post sample ballots on the website and teach people how to do this. And it won't look like that diagram that you just saw, the ES&S diagram.
Now,
Simple, safe, secure, low cost, highly
now
transparent.
Now you're a little biased, and I don't think you hide it, but of all of the candidates running for Secretary of State, would we even get consideration on a hand-marked paper ballot from Nancy Landry? Just say yes or no, in your opinion.
No.
Would we get that from Clay Pelosi Schexnayder?
No.
Would we get that from Mike Francis?
No.
Would we get that from one young man named Mr. Trosclair?
Yes.
So he is the only candidate that has advocated for a system that's 100% auditable and that it incorporates, people and not computers, basically.
Correct. That's correct. And in all fairness, I didn't know Brandon before I met him in November, and we've been working on this for I've been working on it since November 4th, 2020. So when we figured out that Kyle really was not being candid with us, that's when we started saying we need to look at another candidate. And so John Scanlon, my colleague, knew Brandon, knew that he was, interested in possibly running. So I met Brandon late October, early November, and have been working with him. Full disclosure, been working with him as a senior campaign advisor, I guess you could call me, on a volunteer basis. I don't charge speaking fees. I don't collect reimbursements for anything. All of this work has been paid for, and my work for Brandon is all as a volunteer. So I thank God for having, a little bit of money to be able to do this work.
And I've got one more question, and this is the most important question that I have asked you all night long. Now, this one is serious right here. I want to know, were you responsible for the Mardi Gras mixture in the community coffee? Were you the guy that developed that?
Mardi Gras mixture. We, when I was there, we developed, we started and expanded CC's coffee houses when I was there. We expanded from 4 states to 17 states. So it was a period of a lot of product development and a lot of growth, and it was quite fun and tiring. But we developed flavored coffees when I was there. And one of my projects when I was in operations was to build a flavoring operation within our roasting facility. And so I have to say that I am a trained coffee taster, and I did work on all of those blends and the flavoring, like bread pudding, community coffee, Mardi Gras blend, all of that stuff.
Please don't say pumpkin spice, because I'm going to have a different view of you if you do that.
I had to taste that one too.
Well,
every morning.
Small world, but it sounds like you were responsible for eventually saving me money, because when I lived in Oklahoma and northern Arkansas, there was no community coffee available there. So my parents used to ship me by UPS or FedEx or whatever community coffee, which was pretty darn expensive, but it's worth it.
Right. Good. Put up the last slide, because I think it's important to close, not that, go back, those are just some supporting evidence from other states. This one, if the federal, state, and local election officials collude with law enforcement and partisan third parties to surveil, suppress, and silence conservative voices, what about our votes? And Duke, I think I asked at the RPEC meeting the other night, what's more important, a tweet or a vote to nefarious actors?
A vote, without a
If they're going
doubt.
to censor a tweet, they're going to go to all this trouble. You saw the complex diagram of the censorship enterprise. If they're going to go to all that trouble, wouldn't you think that they would want to censor our votes too?
Yeah, no doubt.
Because a vote means power, control, and money.
Yeah.
And this is the question that Louisiana citizens should be asking.
Without a doubt. Well, it's been a very interesting and enlightening conversation for me, and has made me rethink a few things. And I want to say I appreciate you coming on and going through all this
Thank
with
you.
us.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thanks, Randy. Again, I mean, I know it's long material, and thank you for committing the time, and
Thanks,
putting the
Duke.
work and stepping up, in 2020 when you saw what was going on, for stepping up and playing a part. Too many people just sit at home, and you're an example of what we say on this show week in and week out, that people need to step up and take a role, and you did exactly that. Hat tip to you, brother.
Yes. Yeah, thank you so much. My dad served in the Pacific. He was in the Army before World War II, and he was shipped out after Pearl to the South Pacific. He did a tour down there, and then he came back to go to officers training school for the invasion of Europe, and then fought, landed at Omaha Beach in September, not on D-Day, and fought through some of the campaigns in the Netherlands, went through the Bulge, and ended up 50 miles from Berlin, connecting with the Russian forces that went in to finish off Hitler and the Nazi regime. And so I could do nothing less than try to get to the bottom of what's going on in our country. And so it's a privilege and a duty to serve citizens around the state by hopefully bringing truth and light to an issue that affects all of our lives, because elections have consequences and corrupt elections have catastrophic consequences. And I think we would all agree that we're dealing with that, not only in our state that's losing 50,000 residents a year, but also around our country. So thank you guys so much for what you do. And I appreciate your work in Bossier. And I look forward to coming back up and working with y'all.
Sounds like a plan. You're welcome here anytime.
Thank you so much. Good night.
Take care, Randy. Good night. Well, Rex, another marathon show tonight.
Yes, it's been a while since we did a marathon show. It is 9:30. I could have kept asking questions and trying to make conversation. It was great.
It's just 9:30.
It's just
Oh,
9:30.
we got another hour in us.
Yeah, we've gone longer than 9, and we've gone much longer than 9:30 before.
I hear you. I hear you. Well, hey, are we going to do a show on Thursday, and we're going to tell everybody about the Cypress District or not? Or do we need to have a little debate and haggle about that a little bit?
Let's have a little debate and haggle, because my anniversary was yesterday, and we didn't get to go out to dinner, and we may have scheduled that for Thursday night, so I got to clear that first. But we'll talk about it. We need to go through that video and the audio and kind of analyze that. So we may do one Thursday night. If we do, we'll let everybody know.
Yeah, well, worst case, the point being, guys, there was some shots fired at the Cypress District tonight, and you're not going to want to miss what took place at this meeting. I feel like I'm in Bizarro world.
Let me summarize it this way. Somebody grew a set of kahunas, and I may be supporting somebody that I've previously not been supporting.
I know. I'm feel the same way. I'm kind of like, do I need to write a campaign donation check to his campaign?
Yeah,
I'm thinking I've got to eat crow and get on board.
I know.
That's where I feel like I'm standing right now. But
But we need to analyze it thoroughly. You know, it's always better to take a couple of steps and a couple of breaths and go through everything first. But yeah, I basically am nearly in agreement with you.
yeah, y'all ain't gonna want to miss this
Oh,
because we
and
we may have to.
somebody walked out of the meeting too. So there's also that. It was full on circus drama today at the Cypress District.
No doubt, no doubt. All right, good show. Hat tip. See you next week.
Yes, sir. See you later.